Juraij the Worshipper, when his mother called him, but he did not answer. Juraij was in his small retreat, far from people, devoted to worship. Outside, a woman looked toward his retreat and said to herself, "I will tempt him." But she did not know that within days, Juraij would become the talk of everyone, and that one woman and a little child would become the reason his retreat was destroyed, his reputation ruined, and accusations made against him for something he had never done. But it all began with the voice of one woman, his mother. Juraij was one of the worshippers among the children of Israel. He had built himself a small retreat where he could devote himself to his Lord and spend his time in prayer and worship. One day, he was standing in prayer. Silence, stillness, nothing could be heard except the sound of his own breathing. Then a voice came from outside, "Juraij!" It was his mother. Juraij opened his eyes. He paused for a moment. He looked toward the door, then back at his prayer. His mother was calling him, but he was praying. He thought to himself, "Should I answer my mother, or should I complete my prayer?" He chose to complete his prayer, and his mother walked away. The next day, Juraij was praying again, and the same voice returned, "Juraij!" It was his mother. He heard her and hesitated again, but he did not answer. He continued his prayer, and his mother walked away. On the third day, it happened again. Juraij was praying, and his mother was at the door. "Juraij!" This time, his mother was not merely waiting. There was pain in her heart. She called him, but he did not answer. She called him again, but he did not answer. Then she said, "O Allah, do not let him die until he sees the faces of immoral women." And she walked away. Juraij did not know that those words would be the beginning of his trial. Days passed. People began talking about the worshipper who hardly ever left his retreat. And in those days, there was a woman known for her beauty and immorality. She said, "If you wish, I will tempt him for you." She approached Juraij and tried to attract him, but Juraij did not turn toward her. She did not open his door to her. She could not gain anything from him. She became angry, and she said to herself, "If I could not tempt Juraij, I will make him regret rejecting me." There was a shepherd who used to stay near Juraij's retreat. The woman went to him and committed immorality with him. Then she became pregnant. Months passed until she gave birth to a child. Then she carried the child before the people and said, "This child is Juraij's." The accusation spread. Juraij, the worshipper, the man who never left his prayer? They said, "He has committed adultery." They did not ask, they did not investigate, they simply turned against him. They went to his retreat, they destroyed it, they dragged him out, they beat him. And Juraij hardly understood what was happening. He said, "What is wrong with you?" They said, "You committed adultery with this woman and she gave birth to your child." Juraij looked at the baby. Then he said, "Where is the child?" They brought the baby. The people gathered around him. Everyone was waiting, and Juraij, the man they had seen yesterday as an example of worship, was now standing accused before them. Juraij said, "Let me pray." So he prayed. Then he approached the child. He placed his hand near him and said, "Little boy, who is your father?" Silence fell. Moments passed. Then something happened that no one expected. The child opened his mouth and said, "My father is the shepherd." Everyone froze. No one spoke. The truth had been revealed. Juraij was innocent. The woman had lied, and the accusation that had destroyed his retreat collapsed in a single moment. The very people who had beaten him were now asking for his forgiveness. They said, "We will build your retreat out of gold." He said, "No." They said, "Silver." He said, "No." Then he asked them to rebuild it exactly as it had been, from clay. And Juraij returned to his retreat. But the story did not end there. For the Prophet ﷺ did not mention the story of Juraij merely to tell us about a child who spoke in infancy. There was a deeper lesson behind it. Juraij was a worshipper. He prayed, he worshipped, he devoted himself to his Lord. But his mother was calling him. And here is the question we must stop and consider. What happens when a person becomes so occupied with worship that he neglects the rights of his parents? This does not mean that prayer is not azima, quite the opposite. But Juraij teaches the believer to recognize the difference between voluntary worship and the rights of one's parents, which should not be neglected. The mother who carried you, stayed awake for you, fed you, cared for you when you could do nothing for yourself, should not be the last voice you listen to. Your phone should not be more important than her call. Your work should not be more important than her need for you when you have no valid excuse. Imagine your mother calling you today and you say, later. Then you become busy and time passes. Then one day you search for her voice, but you cannot hear it. You look for her face, but she is no longer there. You wish you could return to that moment when you were busy just to say, yes, Mom, what do you need? But that moment will not return. So if your parents are still with you today, you are standing before a tremendous blessing. Do not make honoring them merely a post that you share or a prayer that you write. Make it an action. Call them, ask about them, sit with them, serve them. Kiss their heads, for some doors do not remain open forever. And now, I want you to answer honestly. If you could go back to the moment of Juraij and you were performing a voluntary prayer while your mother was calling you, what would you do? Write your answer in the comments. Then go to your mother or father, even if only through a short message. Tell them, I love you. And I ask Allah to grant you a long life in obedience to Him. Perhaps that message will be the most beautiful thing they hear from you today. And if you enjoyed the story, subscribe to the Return to Allah channel and share it with someone who needs to remember the virtue of honoring their parents. Because some stories are not told merely for us to hear them. They are told so that we can change something in our lives.